Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast covers everything tech. The hottest mobile phones, tablets, games. We review it, rate it, test it. Whether you're Microsoft or Apple, Android or iPhone, we'll give it to you again. Black and white. The Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast.
Welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Charney.
And I'm your co-host, Shay Northrup. And today we're going to talk to you guys about Pictar, Yee's camera, Snapchat unveiling its new connected sunglasses, Nikon gets in on the action, a new macro lens, and a 1 terabyte SD card. Interesting stuff. So one of the things that's kind of interesting, how much do you take pictures with your phone, Jonathan? I know you have an iPhone.
All the time, actually. Partially because I've got a bad memory and partially because I find certain things interesting, so constantly.
Do you use the automatic settings, or do you ever play around with the manual settings?
Pretty much, I kind of rompo-peel it, so I use whatever settings are available. I mean, there are apps and other things that let me change settings, but I usually use the stock ones.
So there's no denying that smartphone cameras are getting better and better for, every generation of phone. But what are you supposed to do about controllability? Well, Migo's Kickstarter-funded Pictar is shipping out soon, and it might be just the thing you guys all might need to be taking better photos with your smartphone. So essentially what this thing is it's a little... You slide your phone into it, and it uses your headphone jack and your lightning bolt?
Lightning bolt, yeah.
Yeah, your lightning bolt jack to give you more access to the settings. So what it does is it's got, shutter speed. And
So question, is this with their own app or with Apple's own app? Because I'm assuming Apple's own app wouldn't let you have that type of access to the camera.
From what I understand, I think it just uses the camera on the phone itself. I don't think you need your own app to go with it. Now, one of the things that it does, and some problems you probably didn't know even existed, is it adds a grip with a shutter button with a 3-control wheel to the iPhone. One of the wheels controls the zoom, one is programmable, and the other one does like a number of functions. So basically it turns your cell phone into a small DSLR. And probably the cool thing about this is it's only $120. So if you want to be able to, access your camera settings in your phone a little bit better, I feel like this is the way to go.
See, I'm on the other side of this. If you really want portability, usability, and a good camera, see, to me, this isn't the option. I mean, the best thing about having a camera on your smartphone is the ease of use. It's a simple push a button. There's nothing else. I mean, I don't know. In my opinion, if you want an actual camera, get like a mirrorless DSLR, get a Canon Rebel, get a point and click. I mean, you can kind of select what type of camera you want now because how cheap they are.
Well, I think the thing with this is if you have an iPhone already and it's so portable, because it's essentially the same size as your iPhone. If you're carrying this around and you end up in a situation where you need to be taking a picture or you want to take a picture, and you have this at your disposal, it's a little bit easier to carry around than a DSLR, because you're not going to be carrying your DSLR everywhere you go.
Yeah, but the only problem is by looking at the pictures, this does add some heft and size to it.
Yeah, so keep it in a separate compartment. Like I could see this being something that maybe more for like the soccer mom, or, like more of the consumer rather than an actual photographer. And I could see reporters and news people who just so happen to be walking by something that happens, or they might not be able to carry around all that gear. This might be a good option.
I don't know. I mean, I've been to CES and seen reporters and all that doing full-on shoots with iPads, so it is totally possible.
I've seen them do it with iPads. I've seen people record entire conferences with their iPhone. It's surprising.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I could see for the use case, but I mean, my thought is especially if you're a professional videographer or news person, my thought is you would have something on your body at all times, but with this extra case, I mean, I guess if you carry around some sort of bag with you, that'd be fine, but I put everything in my pocket. By the pictures of this thing, it's not pocket friendly unless you're wearing cargo shorts.
It's kind of like carrying around an old. It reminds me of carrying around the disposable cameras.
Yeah, it or like the old 35 millimeter phone. The old 35 millimeter film cameras. I mean, that's the.
It's not quite that heavy, but yeah, I can see what you're saying.
I don't know. On the other hand, if they wanted to send us a free model to actually test, I'd be game for it because it looks like there are definitely some possibilities for it. I actually like your soccer mom, your kid shoots. There's definitely some use case for it.
I know people who don't want to go out and buy an expensive DSLR for their little Vine videos and YouTube videos and stuff, and they don't want to go out and buy expensive cameras. So a lot of people shoot a lot of their stuff on their phones.
Now,
this might be a good option.
Now, the question is, does this have a mount on it for a tripod? Will this use with tripod mounts? And that's the one thing I don't remember reading in that. It
doesn't talk about it, but I'm sure it does. Most camera things like this do come with a tripod mount.
See, that's my question.
That's just kind of an industry standard.
Because if it allows you to use a tripod mount, or if you can use, because there are things you can mount onto tripods for phones. I think if you could do that, I think I could see the use case for this.
So one of the things that's kind of weird, because the iPhone 7 doesn't have a headphone socket, I guess what it does is it uses high-frequency sounds that are inaudible to the human ear, so that way the phone app uses the microphone built into the phone to listen for signals and stuff like that, which is kind of weird. But apparently it works.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Now, regarding the iPhone 7, the one thing I haven't been able to find yet is, can it actually charge and be used, the Lightning Bolt port, at the same time? Because if you can charge it and use it, then I don't see a reason why it couldn't have a microphone built into the shell, the camera thing.
Right.
But on the other hand, if it needs to be charged, if it can't charge and be used at the same time, then I can see, you're stuck with one or the other.
Yeah.
See, that's my major thing. And I don't know, I'm still a big fan of the DSLRs. I know there's a V camera that brings some I don't know, is it underdogs? I'm a big fan of the Micro Four Thirds just because I like the idea of a smaller DSLR. Now, usually DSLRs, right, when people think about it, they're thinking about the Canon 50D, the Rebel, anything with the bigger, more expensive Nikons. Now, the cool thing about Micro Four Thirds is they're just smaller. They're, I don't know, what do you think? Half the size?
Well, they're a four thirds of the size of a full frame lens.
Well, I meant that not just the lens, but the whole body. Most of them I've seen. It depends.
I've seen like bigger. I've seen like big Panasonic cameras that used Micro Four Thirds, and I've also seen like the Panasonic GH4 uses Micro Four Thirds.
Now, what my co-host is talking about on 4/3, it's the actual camera. It's the lens itself, not the body. When you're talking about professional cameras, there's two things. There's the glass and the body, and usually when you buy one, they usually come with a starter glass / lens, and then the whole body.
I've even seen Micro Four Thirds lenses kind of bigger and heftier too. Like, I've seen both.
Really? Because the reason why I've always wanted one, my dad has a 50D, is a 50 or 30D, and I love the camera, but I just don't want to be carrying something around that's that size. So the benefit of having a Micro Four Thirds is it's smaller. Generally, it's not always. Now, there's one interesting. The V camera brings something to the market. It's a carbon fiber body, which is not really unusual in the camera market. It's roughly about 280 grams. The only issue with that, I'm assuming, is with that weight, it actually might be hard to keep steady if you're not using it at a tripod. One of the reasons I like heavier cameras, for example,
right,
is you're able to keep it stable. It sounds weird. You would think, no, you want as light as possible. From my experience, you want some heft, just not like 1980s camcorder type heft.
Well, one of the things is I know some of the people that have reviewed this camera have said that it's almost too light, that they're having a hard time even using it because of how lightweight it is.
Oh,
because it only weighs 280 grams.
I can totally see that. I have some cameras that I've used in the past that they're light and they're minimalist. That's actually, this one has a minimalist design on it, and I'm not a big fan of minimalist for a couple of reasons. One is lack of controls. This one has a touch screen. And to be completely honest, I don't like touchscreens on cameras. I like some things on it, like basic settings and all that. But if I'm going to want to mess with like...
Having a touchscreen is nice if you don't want to have to play with all the buttons to get your shutter speed and aperture all set up. But it's also a bit of a hurdle as far as the fact that, like, once you learn the touchscreen, then you don't know how to do it on a manual camera.
See, that to me is if I want to mess with the shutter, the f-stop, anything like that, I want to be able to have some sort of manual control with that. And granted, there's multiple ways to do that, but I like both. I like the ability to do the touchscreen and maybe a macro button you can assign to it.
Looking at this camera, it looks like it has some settings to where you don't have to just use the touchscreen.
Now, according to this, it's going to be roughly $499. Seems a little on the high end for this, personally.
You can buy some pretty good DSLRs for that.
That's my problem. Is one of the reasons I like some of the Micro Four Thirds is they're cheaper than a full-on price. You can buy a Canon Rebel for this. Matter of fact, I think you can buy the expensive Canon Rebel kit that comes with two lenses, not just the cheap.
And you can also get a GoPro, which takes pictures. And
this is a 20 megapixel camera. Honestly, 20 megapixels, well, impressive. It's not actually the most important thing on it.
No. It's it's a big misconception.
What's really important is like the how much light it lets in on the glass. So there's a lot of little things that matter. I mean, the more megapixels, generally the better, but that's just one item in the list of things, in my opinion. Now, we're coming up to a break. When we come back from the break, we're going to be talking about Snapchat.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch, whatever it may be.
Now, I'm assuming most people who are listening to this have heard of Snapchat. Snapchat is, how do I describe it? Allows you to take short video clips of yourself, send it to friends, you can do filters. Personally, I don't completely see the use case for it, but it's not really aimed at people like me. Now, Snapchat has rebranded itself as Snap Incorporated. One of the genius moves about this is it kind of allows them to move away from their app a little bit and try different things.
Right. They're no longer a software company, but they are a software and hardware company.
Now, their first hardware device, I guess if you can call this, is a pair of sunglasses. Now, the sunglasses have a little camera in the right or left side, I don't remember which, and it records 10 seconds. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, 10 seconds of video. Now, they're roughly $130, which is a lot for 10 seconds of video.
And for a pair of sunglasses, I don't know. What is kind of cool, though, is the camera employs a 115-degree lens, which is pretty close to the human's field of vision. So you kind of get to see what the person is seeing.
See, that part I like, but my major problem is it's 10 seconds of video. Now, it says it's connected, so my thought is it's probably dumping onto a cell phone. So this is less hardware limitation, but software limitation. Now, if you could... I don't know. If you could turn off the limitation, I think it'd be cool. You know, say if you're going to the Monterey Bay Aquarium and something like that, I think it'd be cool. Family picnics, videos, stuff like this, I think would be cool because it's relocating the camera from your hand, your cell phone, from your DSLR or VHS camcorder, whatever you have, to your glasses. I think that would be cool.
There are a couple problems I have with this. Although, actually, if you take a look at the video, I don't know if you watched the video that they have for it. It's actually shot fairly well. Like, I think that the camera itself isn't as bad as you'd think for $130. But one of the things that I could see being a problem is I'm not sure how obvious it is that you're recording. And I don't know how obvious it is that it's a camera, because I could see people trying to use this thing for espionage. I could see people trying to, people getting upset because they could be recorded at any second.
You're definitely running into Google Glass territory. Now,
Yes.
Google Glass was famous for having a camera attached to it, and the argument that really consisted was bring it into the restroom, stuff like that. Recording friends' conversations, like my co-host said. That's honestly one of the issues. Now, see, to me, this could be solved by simple. Now, if you look at the glasses, they have this little yellow ring around the camera. With today's technology, it would be easy to make that light up with, with say, a small OLED wire or something, so you could see. Which, honestly, I actually should be, if not a law, should be common sense. People need to know they're being recorded, especially on something like this. Because if you're in a public area and there's cameras like security cameras, you're being recorded. But how do you know? How do I know Shay's not recording me?
Right. I guess because they're sunglasses, they're a little less conspicuous than Google Glass.
Yeah.
But it doesn't...
They're ugly, by the way. These are not good-looking sunglasses. These vaguely remind me of 80s, early 90s-ish look.
Well, I think the kids are into that kind of thing again.
Seriously?
Yeah, people are kind of wearing the 80s styles as far as sunglasses go.
Wow.
I honestly don't think they look that bad.
I don't know. See, this is one of the issues I have with stuff like that is, I don't know, part of it's ugly, part of it's design, part of it is I don't really see the use case for it. I mean,
it's so that tweens can go and beg their parents for the money to go get some, and then they can go and record little videos.
So let me ask you a question. Obviously, Shay is younger than me. What is your use case for this? Because my use case would be for this. If I have kids... If I don't know, for one thing, I'm a big fan of shooting guns. So for me, if I might be able to use this to actually see, okay, where's my head looking? Where am I target on range? Type of things that I could see. But I don't really see the use of 10-second videos.
Right. This is useless for me. They have, for I think $150, maybe somewhere between $150 to $190, GoPro has made a very simple square camera that just has one button.
The Session.
Yeah, the Session. The GoPro Session. I would just get a GoPro Session. It's small, it's lightweight, and it gets better video.
The Session's actually not a bad camera. It does require a what do you call it? A Class 10 micro SD card. But besides that, I mean, they're great little cameras. The only other question is optical image stabilization. How does it stabilize the video? Because people's heads move in a way that if you're not careful, you're going to make everybody kind of hurl.
Well, I've watched some video from this, some test video. And, of course, I'm not sure if it's as good as the test video makes out, because we all know how that goes.
Oh, yeah.
But watching the test video, there were these chicks doing kickflips and skateboarding underneath each other and high-fiving each other and doing all kinds of sweet kickflips, man. And it looked fine.
I don't know. Demo videos have me... I'm usually pretty wary about them because famously, for example, Steve Jobs, when he did the first iPhone announcement, the whole thing was choreographed on what he could do in order to actually not crash the phone, if I remember the story correctly.
And not just that, but I'm worried to know all the editing that's gone into it, because GoPros don't initially look great until you start doing some serious color correction. And I'm wondering how much color correction they did. I'm wondering how much they actually went in and played with it,
See, but GoPros, though, the image quality, not the color, but image quality is there off the bat.
I can't imagine something being $130 having great image quality.
What if they use, some of the better cell phones have not expensive, not super cheap parts, but fairly inexpensive, relatively speaking? What if they used cameras, the same camera say the Galaxy uses, type of thing? If you could actually fit the tech into a pair of sunglasses.
Even if you're using just a standard iPhone camera, the iPhone camera is pretty good.
This is true. I don't know.
My little LG, I have a little LG, and it actually has a pretty sweet camera. I'll show you some of the pictures when we get on a break so you can kind of get an idea. But surprisingly enough, my video capability on my little $50 LG is really good. The stabilization sucks.
I don't know. I actually have access to Google Glasses, and one of the cool things about Google Glass is you could actually do more with it than just record. Granted, not much more, and it's actually kind of uncomfortable to use because you got to stare up high up. But that to me has more use, and maybe it's just because I'm old. And I know I keep harping on use case, but can you guys do me a favor? If this is something that you could see yourself using, what would you use it for? Now, I want you to go to facebook.com/ was it GSMC Technology Podcast? This is episode 33. And tell me, what is
Talk
your
to
use?
us on Twitter, too. We're on Twitter.
Is it GSMC Technology Podcast?
It's just tech.
Is it tech? GSMC Tech. And tell us, what is your use case? Because I really don't see the point of 10-second videos. I've never understood it. Matter of fact, I don't get the point of Vine or Snapchat.
I actually like Vine.
No, why do you like Vine?
I like Vine because it's like watching YouTube videos, but they're like 6-7 seconds long. So they're like condensing a skit down into 6 seconds. So it's usually a lot funnier because you don't have to deal with as much
so this
setup.
So from your perspective as a filmmaker, as a guy who does a lot of video, a lot of audio, that's what you like about it.
I also like it because you can I think it's mostly phone based, although I'm not sure how much you can do otherwise. I'm actually looking into it. I think it's a good way to kind of get yourself a good follower base for your YouTube page and stuff like that. Okay,
I guess that makes sense because I never understood the point of Vine. And there are some pretty amazing Vines. Like I've seen people who must have spent a good couple of hours setting up shots.
Yeah, there's some good stuff there. There's some funny stuff there too.
Now, we're coming up with the break. When we come back from the break, we're going to be talking about a very interesting camera lens.
All right.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast. Now, one of the things we kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about is Venus Optics is quickly becoming a leader in extreme lens designs. So they have this new 24mm f14x2 macro lens. And it's a little crazy looking. It looks like, honestly, it looks like the barrel of a rifle.
It was either that or something in Harry Potter.
Yeah, it's super long, and it has a little tiny bitty lens at the end.
I wish I could find the actual length of this lens too, because it's long. I'm thinking it's at least a foot.
So this thing uses your standard Canon lenses, and I've looked at a couple of the photos. I'm not super impressed by the imagery, but then I would really like to go and look at some other things because this was obviously just shot at a demo. Now, are you familiar with what a macro lens does, Jonathan?
No.
So basically, essentially what a macro lens does is it's for those shots where it's super close up, so that way you can get a lot of focus.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And still, and so that's what this is for.
Like if you're saying like taking a picture of a drop of water type of thing.
Yes, a drop of water, a bug crawling around on the floor, that sort of thing. This is what you'd want to use. It's so that way things are zoomed in really good, and it gives a nice shallow depth of field as well. I'm particularly fond of macro lenses, and I wish they would use them more in film. But if you want a macro lens and don't want to spend too much money, because it doesn't say how much these things are. They're scheduled to arrive sometime in 2017.
My guess, just because like not only how long this is and by just reading articles about it, I'm thinking this is going to at least be, if not $100, a couple of $100 by the look of it.
Oh, definitely. At least a couple hundred. Glass, especially good glass, is very expensive. Like Venus Optics, I guess they're becoming a bit of a household name, but they're definitely not prime.
Are they boutique? I guess what I mean by boutique is they're not a large manufacturer. They make lenses that may not be Like, for example, like Canon wouldn't exactly make a lens that looks like this, that allows them to play around with design and style and form and function more than Canon would because of their bottom line.
Well, they're not Zeiss, and they're definitely not Prime, but I think they go for, most of their lenses go for around $400, which, isn't too bad. And I'm looking at some of the pictures right now, and they're not terrible. Like, they look like they're nice, fun lenses, and if you're willing to spend a little bit of extra money on some nicer lenses, I think these are a good choice. But if you want to do macro lenses on the cheap, there is an adapter that Canon makes that you can get on Amazon.com, and it's only $15. So basically what it is it's an extension tube that you put on your camera, and then you put your lens on it for extreme close-ups. It's actually pretty cool.
How well does that work? Because you're basically adding you're narrowing what the camera can see and then having a lens on top of that.
Believe it or not, it actually works really well.
Does it?
Yes, I've seen it used in a lot of student films. Mostly films, but I've seen it used in a lot of student films, and it usually comes out looking pretty good.
Now, what would you use this for a film, for example? What would be the benefit of using a camera like that, or even an adapter like that, or a lens like this?
The benefit, I've seen it used a lot for iris shots, where people want to get a shot of, like, say, somebody's iris, like, expanding or closing, or I've seen people do it for bugs crawling over things.
Okay, so I guess, say if you're in a movie and somebody's doing a retina scan, and so you want a picture of the person's eye, and
right.
you in post-production add all the effects to it. Okay, that makes sense.
Or if you want to, like, get like a really close-up shot where you can see the individual details of somebody's fingernail, or you want to see things up really close with a lot of details so that you're not pushing your lens literally up against them. This is what you want to use.
Okay, that makes sense. And that adapter works just fine. Does it have any side effects versus, say, something like this, which is purposely built for that?
I'd say the only side effect that I really see that's a problem, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but it's sometimes a little bit difficult to take the lens off of the mount. Like, you're not going to destroy your lens or anything, but
it just takes a little bit more force.
Yeah, it's
than
a little
normal.
bit more force.
Okay, so it's kind of like attaching the processor fan on a motherboard. You have to bend the board just a little bit to put it on.
And these kind of adapter things are nothing new. I've seen people use like Canon mounts and little adapters, so that way they can get a Micro Four Thirds censored camera to use Canon lenses, and I've seen people use adapters to let Canon lenses use Micro Four Thirds.
No, that was definitely something that I'm interested in, because I really want a Micro Four Thirds camera, and so that was one of the things I have access to. Some decent Canon glass, and that was something that was important to me. It's, say if I buy a Panasonic DSLR, is there an adapter that I can use? That was actually something that to me is really interesting.
And those adapters are fairly inexpensive.
Now, we're going to kind of switch a little bit. And instead of talking about the cameras themselves, we're going to be talking about the memory cards. Now, everybody's familiar with Sandisks. They make pretty much everything under the sun that has to do with storage. Now,
they're the inventors of the SD card.
Now, a prototype, so hold your horses, a prototype of a full terabyte SD card by Western Digital Corporation has been released. Now, a terabyte. Now, so most hard drives and computers today now come with a terabyte, but that's either a full spinning platter. I don't even think they have terabyte SD card, like actual
they have solid
SSDs.
State.
Yeah, do they have solid state terabytes?
Yeah, they're just really expensive.
Now, are they fast? Because the one thing I've always wondered about, and especially when you have an SD card, usually in the past, the bigger the SD card, far storage-wise, the slower it's been. I mean, that's...
Well, I mean, it's a prototype. I'm pretty sure that the SD card itself is pretty slow.
Yeah, because I remember, was it 816? One of the earlier bigger ones, larger storage came out. I remember using it, and it was just slow. Now, granted, there's different classes. There's 2, 4, 6, and 10. 10 being the fastest, 2 being the slowest. Most people use 4. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a 2 in the store.
No, 4 is more like pictures and audio, and you want to get a class 10 for just about everything video related, especially if it's 4K. I think the reason the use case for a 1 terabyte SD card is because 4K just takes up so much space.
And there's now cell phones. I think Motorola Mobility, who I forgot who they're actually owned by now, came out with a cell phone that has a 4K camera. And I've actually seen it in person, and the footage is amazing. And 4K is huge. Now, I want you to imagine a Blu-ray and then double that, because 4K is gigantic. It's roughly double or triple the same size as Full HD, which is 1920 by 1080 in resolution.
Now, one of the things that's interesting to note as well, the record-breaking 512 gigabyte SD card that Sandisk has came out in 2014, and it is really expensive. The Sandisk 512 gigabyte SD card runs for $347 on Amazon. Now, if you want a cheaper model, P and Y, which they're not terrible. That'll get you by. That is $191.
Now, there is one small problem with using bigger SD cards is not everything will support them. Some cameras I've seen can only support up to 32 or 64. Newer cameras are able to do 128 and larger. So if you decide to buy, say, the 1 terabyte, the 512 gigabyte, we recommend making sure your camera actually can support that. Now, some cameras have the ability to have their firmware updated. Firmware updates may actually change the max storage it can support. For example, some phones I've seen can only support a 32 gigabyte micro SD card.
Right.
So make sure you can do that before you spend like $300 and something bucks. And I guarantee when this comes out, this is probably going to be close to $1,000. This is definitely not going to be a cheap piece of kit. Now, Shay and I want you to do us a favor. We want you to go to GSMC Technology Podcast Facebook page, and this is episode 33. Do you have a question, comment, or is there a story that you'd be really interested in our take on? The other thing, we want you to go to gsmcpodcast.com, click on the Technology Podcast, and subscribe. You can find us everywhere on the interwebs. Also, there's a ton of other amazing content on the GSMC network, like football, for example. The Sci-Fi Podcast is a great. And from Shay and I, as always, thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.